From the studios of Atlantic Television Network in Port Harcourt, this is ATN International News. First, the headlines. African leaders gather for funeral of Nujoma. 4-year-old dies of Ebola in Uganda. Umaru threatens to expel ECOWAS political mission. Trump sued for seeking control over election commission. TikTok investigated overuse of children's data. China accuses U.S. of fentanyl blackmail. African leaders, past and present, gathered in Namibia on Saturday to bury the country's founding father, Sam Nujoma, who challenged colonialism and the military occupation by South Africa's racist white minority government. Dignitaries including South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, former President Thabo Mbeki, and ex-Tanzanian President Jakaya Kikwete attended the funeral of Nujoma, who rose from herding cattle as a boy to lead the sparsely populated, most desert southern African country on March 21, 1990. We fought under your command, won the liberation struggle, and forever removed apartheid colonialism from the face of Namibia, President Nangolo Mbumba said in a speech. His coffin, draped in the red, green, and blue national flag, Nujoma was laid to rest 2 weeks after his death at the age of 95 at a North Korean-built war memorial spire called Heroes Acre. The monument honors those who fought for independence from genocidal German colonialism and later, after Germany lost the territory in the World War I South African occupation. Nujoma served from 1990 to 2005 and sought to project himself as a unifying leader, bridging political divides. However, he faced criticism over his intolerance of critical media coverage, diatribes against homosexuality, and over the 1998 constitutional amendment allowing him to run for a third term. French President Emmanuel Macron said on Friday that he was concerned about the detention and the health of Franco-Algerian author Boualem Sansal in Algeria, and added that it was time to review agreements about immigration between the two countries. Sansal has been detained in Algeria since November, and French authorities as well as fellow writers have repeatedly called for his release. Boualem Sansal's arbitrary detention on top of his worrying health situation is one of the elements that need to be settled before confidence between our countries can be fully restored, Macron told reporters in Porto, Portugal. He also said his government has right to review immigration agreements between the two countries over Algeria's refusal to accept Algerians deported from France. Prime Minister Francois Bayrou said on Wednesday that he will review a decades-old agreement that makes it easier for Algerian citizens to move to France unless Algeria agrees to take back those who are deported by the French authorities. Already strained ties between Paris and Algiers have worsened further after an Algerian citizen who France had long tried unsuccessfully to repatriate killed one person and injured three in a knife attack in the city of Mulhouse on Saturday. Under a 1968 pact between France and its former colony, Algerian citizens enjoy several exceptions to French immigration laws, making it easier to move to and settle in France. Macron said that France would not unilaterally renounce the 1968 agreement and that he had already had discussions with Algerian President Abdelmadjid Tebboune about updating them. Second Ebola death in Uganda, a 4-year-old child marks a setback in efforts to contain the outbreak declared on 30th January. The child, who died on Tuesday, had been receiving treatment at the main referral facility in Kampala. This follows the earlier death of a male nurse, the first recorded victim of the outbreak. The World Health Organization, WHO, confirmed the child's death on Saturday and said efforts were underway to bolster surveillance and contact tracing measures. While Ugandan officials had previously expressed confidence in controlling the outbreak, citing the discharge of 8 Ebola patients earlier in February, this recent fatality raises concerns. The World Health Organization's Uganda office released a brief statement acknowledging the death but provided no further details. Local health officials have yet to comment on the case. The initial victim, a male nurse, had sought medical attention at various facilities in both Kampala and eastern Uganda before succumbing to the disease. He had also consulted a traditional healer in an attempt to diagnose his illness. The successful treatment of 8 patients who had been in contact of that man, including some of his relatives, had left local health officials anticipating the end of the outbreak, but they are still investigating its source. Tracing contacts is key to stemming the spread of Ebola, and there are no approved vaccines for the Sudan strain of Ebola that's infecting people in Uganda. More than 20 screened daily for Ebola at the Uganda's different border crossing points, according to World Health Organization, which supports the work. The World Health Organization has given Uganda at least $3 million to support its Ebola response, but there have been concerns about adequate funding in the wake of the U.S. administration's decision to terminate 60% of USAID's foreign aid contracts. Guinea-Bissau's President Umaru Sissoco threatened to expel a political mission sent to his country by the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, the political and economic bloc said on Sunday. A dispute over when Embalo's presidential term, which began in 2020, should end has heightened tensions that risk unrest in a nation with a history of military coups. The tiny West African nation's political opposition says Embalo's term should have expired last week, while the Supreme Court of Justice has ruled that it ends on September 4. Embalo, who chaired ECOWAS from mid-2022 to mid-2023, said on February 23rd that presidential and legislative elections will not be held until November 30th. ECOWAS said in a statement on Sunday that it had deployed a mission from February 21 to 28 together with the United Nations Office for West Africa and the Sahel UNOWAS to help reach a consensus on how to conduct an election this year. But it added the mission departed Bissau in the early morning of 1st March following threats by H.E. Umaru Sissoco Embalo to expel it. On Wednesday, Embalo visited Moscow for talks with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Guinea-Bissau is a former Portuguese colony that gained independence in 1974. U.S. judge on Saturday declared President Donald Trump's file of the scope of presidential power likely to be decided at the U.S. Supreme Court. U.S. District Judge Amy Berman Jackson in Washington had previously ruled Hampton Delinger, the head of the Office of Special Counsel who was responsible for protecting whistleblowers, could remain in his post pending a ruling. Jackson said in her ruling Saturday that upholding Trump's ability to fire Delinger would give him constitutional license to bully officials in the executive branch into doing his will. The Justice Department filed a notice late on Saturday saying they were appealing Berman's ruling to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia. Delinger, who term last year, said in an email to reporters that he is grateful to see the courts confirm the importance and legality of the job protection Congress afforded by my position. He added his efforts to protect federal employees generally and whistleblowers in particular from unlawful treatment will continue. Lawyers for the Trump administration have argued that the order keeping Delinger in place is an encroachment on Trump's authority over officials serving in his administration. Jackson, who was named to the bench by President Barack Obama, rejected the contention that the statute is unconstitutional, saying the special counsel's job is to review unethical or unlawful practices directed at federal civil servants and help whistleblowers act without suffering reprisals. Crash involving two buses in Bolivia left at least 37 people dead and dozens injured in the western Potosi region, police and local authorities said on Saturday. The accident happened during the early morning hours on the route between the cities of Uyuni and Colchani when one of the vehicles swerved into the oncoming lane. As a result of this fatal accident, we have 39 people injured in 4 hospitals in the town of Uyuni, and 37 people have lost their lives, a spokesperson for the Departmental Police Command of Potosi told reporters. Police personnel are working to identify people and those who were injured and hospitalized, the spokesperson said. At the scene, a crane turned over one of the buses which had rolled over onto its side, and police officers were seen removing bodies from the crashed vehicles and carrying them away wrapped in blankets. According to the preliminary investigation, one of the buses encroached into the oncoming lane, presumably due to speeding, and caused the collision, the Bolivian Ministry of Government said in a statement. 9 people were arrested during a raucous demonstration outside a New York City Telcel dealership on Sunday, protesting owner Elon Musk's role in sweeping cuts to the federal workforce at the behest of President Donald Trump. The protest, which police said involved hundreds of people, was one of a wave of Telcel takedown demonstrations staged across the country targeting billionaire Musk, who is spearheading the Trump administration's so-called Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE. Throngs of protesters also descended on the electric vehicle makers' showrooms in Jacksonville, Florida, Arizona, and other cities, blocking traffic, chanting and waving signs reading "Born a Telcel, Save Democracy," and "No Dictators in the USA." Musk, the world's richest person, is leading an unprecedented push to shrink the federal government that has resulted in the firing of thousands of employees and the termination of hundreds of aid contracts and federal leases. Telcel and a White House spokesperson did not immediately respond to attempts to seek comment by phone and email on Sunday. In some cases, federal agencies have been forced to try to hire back key workers that had been fired, including some responsible for America's nuclear weapons, scientists trying to fight a worsening outbreak of bird flu, and officials responsible for supplying electricity. At least 100,000 of the 2.3 million federal employees have agreed to buy out or have been fired since Trump took office on January 20th. Former National Association for the Advancement of Colored People President Hazel Dukes died at her home in New York City on Saturday at 92. While she may have passed on, hers is a legacy that will outlive us all, NAACP leaders said in a joint statement. Dukes, an Alabama native, migrated with her family to New York in the 1940s. Following the move, she got involved in the movement for racial equity across healthcare, education, and housing, according to the NAACP. Dukes was later selected by U.S. President Lyndon B. Johnson to his Head Start program, which was aimed at meeting the emotional, social, health, nutritional, and psychological needs of preschool-aged children from low-income families. Duke succeeded Enolia Macmillan, the first woman to lead the NAACP, as president in 1990. She held that position until 1992 and served as president of the NAACP New York State Conference at the time of her death. Former U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton presented Dukes with the NAACP's highest honor, the Spingarn Medal, in 2023 for her more than 70 years of work in civil rights. These 70 years have not been easy. They have been filled with pain, hardships, and tribulations, Duke said after receiving the award. But the struggles of those who paved the way serve as a powerful reminder that we must take bold steps to confront racism and tirelessly advocate for civil rights. U.S. President Donald Trump was sued on Friday by the Democratic Party over a recent executive order it says violates federal election law by giving him too much power over the Independent Federal Election Commission. The lawsuit, filed in the Washington, D.C. federal court by 3 national Democratic committees, is the party's first against Trump during the Republican's second White House term. It comes as Democrats, outnumbered in Congress, seek an effective means to counteract far-reaching changes from Trump's first 6 weeks of his second term, including many steps to lessen government oversight and eliminate internal dissent. Several dozen lawsuits have challenged other action in order, giving the White House more control over the Election Commission. The National Labor Relations Board, the Securities and Exchange Commission, and other traditionally independent agencies that normally operate day-to-day at arm's length from the president. Critics have called the order an unprecedented power grab. Democrats said enforcing it would essentially substitute Trump's views on election-related disputes for those of the bipartisan election commission and let him dictate outcomes. Other defendants include Attorney General Pam Bondi, the Election Commission, and 3 commissioners. President Donald Trump's plan to pull federal funding from institutions that provide gender-affirming care for transgender youth will remain blocked on a long-term basis under a federal judge ruling in situ late Friday. U.S. District Court Judge Lauren King previously granted a 2-week restraining order after the Democratic Attorneys General of Washington, Oregon, and Minnesota sued the Trump administration. Colorado has since joined the case. King's temporary order expired Friday, and she held arguments that day before issuing a preliminary injunction blocking most of Trump's plan pending a final decision on the merits of the case. The judge found the states lacked standing on one point: the order's protections against female genital mutilation. Female genital mutilation is already illegal in the 4 states that are part of the lawsuit, and the judge said procedures. Medical programs in some states cover gender-affirming care, and Trump's protecting children. Others suggest that practice could end. It also raises the prospect that medical professionals could be criminally charged for mutilation of underage females, a notion that the states suing Trump can call repugnant and legally unsupportable. Young people who persistently identify as a gender that differs from their sex assigned at birth, a condition called gender dysphoria, are far more likely to suffer from severe depression and to kill themselves if they do not receive treatment, which can include evaluation by a team of medical professionals, a social transition such as changing a hairstyle or pronouns, and eventually puberty blockers or hormones. French prosecutors have closed the case filed by Democratic Republic of Congo, accusing Apple subsidiaries of using conflict minerals in its supply chain, according to a document seen by reporters on Thursday. Congo filed criminal complaints against Apple subsidiaries in France and Belgium. Its lawyers said Apple said then it strongly disputed the allegations and had told its suppliers that they must not use the minerals in question sourced from Congo or Rwanda. In the document seen by reporters and dated February 18, the Paris prosecutor's office said allegations of money laundering and deceptive business practices were not sufficiently well-founded and enclosed the case, meaning it will not proceed with the complaint. The office invited Congo to contact a different office with jurisdiction over war crimes. The prosecutor's office and Apple in France described the decision as a very partial dismissal that they intended to challenge, citing the extreme seriousness of the facts denounced and the need to identify and prosecute those responsible. Congo is a major source of tin, tantalum and tungsten, so-called 3T minerals used in computers and mobile phones. Some artisanal mines are run by armed groups involved in massacres of civilians, mass rapes, looting and other crimes, according to UN experts and human rights groups. Since the 1990s, Congo's mining heartlands in the east have been devastated by waves of fighting between armed groups, some backed by neighboring Rwanda and the Congolese military. The complaints filed in France and Belgium were prepared on behalf of Congo's Justice Minister. Belgium appointed a major investigation into TikTok's use of children's personal information. The Information Commissioner's Office, ICO, will inspect the way in which the social media platform uses the data of 13 to 17-year-olds to recommend further content to them. John Edwards, the Information Commissioner, said it would look at whether TikTok's data collection practices could lead to children experiencing harms, such as data being leaked or spending more time than is healthy on the platform. TikTok told the BBC its recommender systems operated under strict and comprehensive measures that protect the privacy and safety of teens. It added that the platform also has robust restrictions on the content allowed in teens' feeds. Mr. Edwards said TikTok's algorithm feeds on personal data gleaned from user profiles, preferences, links clicked, and how long they spent watching a particular video, making it subject to UK rules. In addition to the probe into TikTok, the ICO is also checking the age verification processes of Reddit and Imgur, an image sharing platform. The investigation will look into whether the companies are complying with both the UK's data protection laws and the Children's Code. The code is set to design principles for online platforms aimed at children in the UK. Platforms which collect UK children's user data must minimize the amount they gather and take extra care when processing it. We'll go on a short break now, and when we return, we'll continue with the rest of the stories. Please stay with us. Acting leader of Abkhazia has over an investment deal with Russia. Acting President Badra Gumba took almost 55% of the votes in Saturday's election in the Russia-backed territory ahead of opposition leader Adjo Adzimba on just under 42%. Abkhazian state news agency media Gumba thanked voters and said he would work to make Abkhazia independent, free, with blackouts blamed on low water levels at a key hydroelectric plant, and large vice president since 2020 took over as acting leader in November after his ally Aslan Bazdana deal with Russia. Top Republicans aligned with U.S. President Donald Trump